How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I'm DM JANGY, and I'm so glad you could be here. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the new D&D starter box set from Wizards of the Coast, Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. The new box set was released in July of this year and is the fifth to be released by Wizards of the Coast, but the first to be released in the last 4 years. In this video, we're going to be taking a cursory overview of the adventure, not a word-for-word reading, and I should warn you, there are going to be some spoilers. So if you are a player or you plan on participating in this game, I suggest you check out one of my other videos. But if you're a dungeon master who plans on running this game, or you're thinking about picking up the box set for yourself, this is the video for you. All right, before we begin today's video, I just want to give a huge shout out to the patrons you see listed here on the screen. Patron support helps to make sure I can commit the most time to making the best content for your enjoyment. And patrons get access to all the awesome content that I produce. You too can be a patron of DM JANGY's for as little as $1 a month and help support a small creator. All right, moving right along with a few words about the box set. This box set, as with all others before it, was designed to serve as a stepping stone or introduction for those who have never played Dungeons & Dragons before, and is an all-inclusive adventure, meaning it has everything you need to run the game right out of the box. What's included in the box are the adventure booklet, the starting rules guide, a set of dice, and 5 pre-generated characters. These pre-generated characters actually have a really interesting backstory tie-in and quests in the adventure booklet that help to make sure the players feel connected to the story. I really think the best thing about this story is the progression and pacing. It is a level 1 through 3 adventure, but it gives the players plenty of time to grow into their character's ability and really explore the island, which is about 5 or 6 miles across, and each of the quest points are spread across the entirety of the island. It's a great way to get players into the game, but at the same time, it still offers great lore and adventures for those who are more experienced or more advanced players who want to pick this box set up and add it to their collection. Now, as I mentioned, this won't be a word-for-word reading. Instead, I'm going to be giving an overview of the adventure and the most important points of the story, as well as offering some of my own advice as a dungeon master. All right, enough preamble. Let's check out the adventure. All right, now here we have the cover for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, the adventure booklet, with some beautiful cover art, with a blue and bronze dragon, I think, doing battle with an adventurer looking onward. The table of contents are here at the bottom with running the adventure first off, with a little bit of information about the adventure and some Dungeon Master tips, and then the adventure itself broken up into 4 chapters, which are Dragon's Rest, Seagrove Caves, Cursed Shipwreck, and the Clifftop Observatory. And then you have the 2 appendices for the magic items and creatures contained within, followed by the credits for everyone involved in this adventure. Now, before we get into the adventure, I want to say this first. The very first thing you should do after you've gotten a group of friends together who want to play in this adventure is make sure you have a session 0 and introduce the players to each other and their characters if they're going to be using one of the pre-generated characters, or give them the option to create their own characters and make sure that you know how their different backstories might be bringing them to this point. The island is a few miles off the Sword Coast, located between Neverwinter and Waterdeep, and so you could have the players meet at the docks before they set off in the ship that's going to take them to the island, and give them a little time to interact with one another during that session 0. Here you have the very first page in the booklet, which is running the adventure, little information about the overview, getting started, and some lore about the Forgotten Realms. They also have a suggestion for the number of players that you'll want to have in this adventure. It says that you can run it with 1 to 5 players. I've never run an adventure for just 1 player, although I know some people have, and it can be a lot of fun. My recommendation is you have at least 3 to 4 players to play in this game. Here you have the adventure background, and I know I said I wasn't going to do a word-for-word reading, but there's some really great lore here that I want to share with you. According to legend, 2 families of dragons came into being in the very first days of the world's creation. Behemoth, the noble platinum dragon, made the metallic dragons: gold, silver, bronze, brass, and copper. Cruel, 5-headed Tiamat made the chromatic dragons: red, blue, green, black, and white. The metallic and chromatic dragons share a mutual animosity that originates in the enmity between Behemoth and Tiamat. The origin of Dragon's Rest is rooted in that animosity. Ages ago, a fire-breathing red dragon called Saruth rampaged up and down the Sword Coast. 3 metallic dragons joined forces to battle Saruth and imprisoned her beneath the ocean floor, believing seawater would quench her fire and keep her bound forever. But Saruth's fury, legend says, caused the undersea volcanic activity that forms Stormwreck Isle. In all likelihood, Saruth is long dead and entombed beneath the island, but chromatic dragons whisper that she still lives and will one day emerge from her prison. One fact is undeniable: the powerful magic embodied and such an ancient dragon has left a permanent mark on Stormwreck Isle. That magic has drawn other dragons to the island throughout the centuries, making it a recurring battlefield in the conflict between chromatic and metallic dragons. Several of these dragons have died there, each leaving behind a spiritual scar that causes unpredictable magical effects. 100 years ago, a blue dragon tried to harness this destructive magic. A bronze dragon named Runara pleaded with him to abandon his schemes. When he refused, Runara killed him, adding one more dragon grave to the island. Runara has grown wary of strife, and Stormwreck Isle's wounds are a constant reminder to her of the cost of such conflict. Devoting herself to peace and reconciliation, she established the Cloister of Dragon's Rest as a safe haven from violence. Living in human guise, Runara now serves as the leader of a tiny group of hermits and ascetics. But the ageless conflict between chromatic and metallic dragons threatens to disrupt the serenity of Dragon's Rest. And this is where the adventure begins. Wow, quite a lot of lore in just a couple of paragraphs, and if you're anything like me, you already have a bunch of ideas and the wheels are turning because I already know how I want to tie in a couple of things from this into the campaigns that I'm running along the Sword Coast. All right, followed by that, you have the adventure outline for Chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Chapter 1 is all about Dragon's Rest, which introduces Runara's cloister and its inhabitants and provides the characters the opportunity to learn about the problems facing the island. It also describes the additional encounters you can use in the course of the adventure, including a magical hot spring with mysterious guardians at the site of a brass dragon's death. In Chapter 2, you have the Seagrove Caves, which describes how the grave of Saruth spawns magical connections to the elemental plane of fire that threatens a community of mushroom-like myconoids. In Chapter 3, you have the Cursed Shipwreck, which details a ship that crashed along the bones of a gold dragon and the horrible curse within the ship's hold. And then finally, for Chapter 4, the culmination at the Clifftop Observatory, which brings the characters to the site where Runara killed a blue dragon and where that blue dragon's grandson has made his lair. There, they'll also find a bronze wormling who rejected Runara's teachings of peace, now held prisoner in the blue dragon's lair. And then you have some information about the adventure maps, which it states here are for the DM's eyes only. The maps show stuff that the players shouldn't see, and if you do need to use some maps in the adventure, just use a general outline that kind of gives a description. But most of the adventure is set up to be theater of the mind. There's really not any included maps in the booklet for the players. And here we have some information for the Dungeon Master, including some Dungeon Master tips, which are embrace the shared story. It's not a competition. Be fair and flexible. Modify the adventure to suit your tastes, and keep a notepad handy. You'll see in the top right-hand corner here, it has this blue box, and it says the text that appears in this box is meant to be read aloud or paraphrased to the players when their characters first arrive at a specific location or under specific circumstances, as described in the text. Now, you're not going to read everything in the booklet, but the blue text does have some really good information that you might want to share. It's got some dialogue, or it has some descriptive information about where the players are. And that's kind of the information that I might read a little bit about as we go through the adventure. Okay, and then we have some info about the creature stat blocks, which are at the back of the booklet. Okay, and here we have our first map of the Stormwreck Isle. Like I said, it's located a couple miles off the Sword Coast. And like I said, it's about 5 or 6 miles across and a couple miles this way. And each of the points in the chapters are located all across the island. So the players are going to arrive here at Dragon's Rest, and then they can choose kind of where they're going to go from there. Now, the Clifftop Observatory doesn't actually get revealed to them until they've completed both of these other quests as per the story. Here we have Chapter 1, Dragon's Rest. This is where the adventurer will arrive at the island and meet the inhabitants as well as Runara and get their adventuring points. Welcome to Dragon's Rest. Your journey was uneventful, but the island, now visible off the bow, promises rare wonders. Seaweed shimmers in countless brilliant colors below you, and the rays of sunlight defy the overcast sky to illuminate lush grass and dark basalt rock of the island. Avoiding the rocks jutting up from the ocean, your ship makes its way towards a calm harbor on the island's north side. A large, open-air temple comes into view, perched on the edge of a cliff high above you. The ship drops anchor at the mouth of the harbor, and 2 sailors row you ashore. You have plenty of time to admire the towering statue at the center of the temple, depicting a wizened man surrounded by 7 songbirds. A long path winds up the side of the cliff to the temple, dotted along the way with doorways cut into the rock. The sailors set you ashore on a rickety dock, where a large rowboat is neatly tied. They point you to the base of the path and wish you good luck before they row back to the ship. Your visit to Dragon's Rest begins. Now, take a look at this artwork because we're going to refer back to that in just a little bit here. And if you guys are paying attention, you'll see some of these characters kind of actually look a little familiar. If you have watched the old Dungeons and Dragons series, maybe you might recognize them. I was actually at the store the other day, my local game store, and I saw that they have a Dragons of Stormwreck Isle miniature set with all these player characters in it, which for the pre-generated characters at least, which I thought was really cool. I might pick that up if I end up running this as an in-person game. Have our first encounter for the players where they're going to run into some drowned sailors. As you're about to leave the beach and start your climb, you hear a rough splashing and a wet, gurgling moan behind you. 3 figures are shambling up from the water's edge about 30 feet away. They're dressed as sailors, but their skin is gray and they look drowned. Seawater drools from their slack mouths as they lurch towards you. So here we have our first encounter for the players where they're going to have 2 choices. They can either run away, which is totally fine, or they can battle these zombies. Now, the zombies aren't going to be a significant threat, but they do have a little bit of an advantage, which is their undead fortitude. Okay, and that means it's going to make them really hard to kill. Now, it says here in the unlikely event that the players do get defeated by the zombies, or it looks like they're about to lose the fight, Renara can come down and rescue them at the last minute. Okay, but you can describe the scene as it says here, where the zombies are kind of slow moving, and the characters are very close to the stairs, and they might be able to very easily get up those stairs. But like I said, they can face these zombies. Once they get up the stairs, either having defeated the zombies or making their way up there with no encounter with them, you can read the following text to them. Your arrival quickly draws the attention of the entire populace of the place, which consists mostly of kobolds. These small reptilian folk eye you curiously while a couple of humans watch from a distance. All the cloister's residents are dressed in simple clothes, and no one carries a visible weapon. One of the kobolds pipes up with, "What's your name?" At that, all the kobolds begin barraging you with questions. "Where are you from? What's that? Why are you here?" And more that are lost in the din. The chattering kobolds fall silent as a new figure comes into view, descending gracefully from the upper part of the cloister. She's an elderly human with weathered brown skin, white hair in tight braids, and kindly hazel eyes, dressed in a simple white robe. She smiles as she draws near and extends her arms in greeting. "Welcome to Dragon's Rest," she says. "May Behemoth's guidance lead you to whatever you seek." Now, the players have officially met Renara. If they didn't get rescued by her, this is where they're going to meet her. And as you remember from that adventure lore, Renara is a dragon who is in human guise, and she's disguised herself as an elderly woman, and she's taken up to running this cloister. She's all about peace and, safety and just giving everybody a chance to kind of find their sanctum. And then we have the kobolds. The information about the kobolds: they're small reptilian humanoids who believe they're descended from dragons and gravitate towards the service of dragons. Kobolds are a pretty cool race, and if you haven't had a chance to play one before, you have a lot of information here for a plethora of different kobolds and some artwork to go with it. And each of the different kobolds, a little bit of information about them is in here as well. And then you have 2 inhabitants of the island that are human, aside from Renara in her disguise, which are Turok and Varna. Turok is a human in middle age. He's kind of like the local botanist. He's got some sorts of his own. He's got a little bit of a dark backstory that somebody can probably recognize if they have a little bit of intelligence on some of his tattoos. But for the most part, he's come to the island to, again, seek peace and some solitude and get away from his past. And then you have Varnith. She's a rough and tumble kind of character. She was once a general who was in charge of some pretty badass group of warriors called the Azure Wolves. But now she's come to, again, just kind of have some peace and calm in her days here on the island. And she kind of takes up work on the temple, and she does some of the handiwork around the island to help out. Now, those are going to be two of the quest givers. Besides Renara, those are going to be two of the quest givers who you're going to get those 2 points for the shipwrecked and the caves. Now, we have some information about Dragon's Rest here: the path in the monastic cells, the winch house, the kitchen, the library, and the temple. And you can see we have a map here for Dragon's Rest. The players are in the southwestern corner, in the bottom left corner. That's where they're going to be dropped off from the ship, and that's where they're going to meet the zombies. But like I said, you can have them easily come up this path and not encounter them. And this is the temple up here at the top left. It is built out to be outside of the cliff face. It's juts out from the cliff face, and it's open air with these pillars that open up to the skyline and a statue of a man there at the center. The Temple of Behemoth. And now you have the cloister quests, where if the zombies didn't get dealt with the first time, they are going to make a second appearance here and threaten some of the inhabitants of the island, to give those players the chance to battle the zombies and get a little bit of a tie-in for one of the other quests. So we also have the sea caves, where Tarak is going to give some information about the myconoids that live in these sea caves that he trades with, and he is no longer able to get access to, and he's going to send the characters to find out what they can do. And the shipwreck, which is something that they're going to get from Varnoth, that quest point from Varnoth. She actually witnessed a shipwreck off the coast not too long ago. And the shipwreck and the zombies are kind of related, and we're going to find out a little bit about that later on. Here we have the information for the individual quests for the characters. Like I explained earlier, each of the pre-generated character sheets has information for a tie-in in the story here for the cleric, the fighter, the paladin, the rogue, and the wizard. So you can use those tie-ins, or the players can create their own. And finally, we have some information about the Lost Wormling, which we heard about in that adventure background. This is after the characters have defeated the zombies, they've dealt with the myconoids, they've already handled the shipwreck quest. So Elder Renara smiles as you approach. "I have something to show you," she says. There's a flash, like a silent stroke of lightning, and the human woman is gone. In her place is an enormous dragon with bronze-colored scales. All right, so I'm going to stop there and kind of go back to that character art. So that's kind of what the characters are seeing here, to that cover art on the chapter 1 page here. That's what the characters are now looking up as. And you can see, actually, she's in that's the temple background with those pillars, and there stands Renara. "Now you see me as I truly am," she says, tilting her head with an expression that might be a smile on her scaled face. "As you have discovered, this island has many old wounds, and I'm afraid the cycle of violence is starting again. I have one more favor to ask you." And this is where Renara is going to give the information that's summarized in the adventure background, that outlines kind of why the stuff that has happened on this island has happened. Now it says here she doesn't want to go to the Clifftop Observatory herself, lest her presence open old wounds. But she does give the characters a moon key, which is going to be essential to access that observatory. Here we have some information about some of the encounters that can happen while the characters are exploring the interior of the island. Some of those encounters are the Hot Spring Havoc and their owlbear. The Hot Spring Havoc is a natural hot spring that is formed up on the island, but it is the site of a brass dragon's death. And this brass dragon's death has caused a kind of a rift that has brought forth these fume drakes. And then we have their owlbear, which, as you can imagine, definitely has to do with an owlbear. The owlbear is most definitely a deadly threat to even a couple of mid-level players, say second or third level players. And so it's not designed to kill the players. It's designed to try to drive them out of the territory. Don't be afraid to have a character be knocked unconscious by a heavy hit. Okay, and then we have the Kobold Renegades, which describes some of the kobolds that have rejected Renara's teachings and are now kind of throughout the island. And there we have some beautiful artwork of an owl bear. Moving right along with chapter 2. So the chapter 1 was arriving at Dragon's Rest, meeting the inhabitants and getting a couple of these quest points. And you can go to either two of the quest points, Seagrove Caves or the ship compass rose, the shipwreck location at either time. The players can go to either one. The adventure is set up to where you can hit one or the other and gain a level after completing one of those and then get to the other one. But it is set up to where they need to complete both of them, as well as dealing with some of the zombies before they're going to go to the Clifftop Observatory for Chapter 4. So in Chapter 2 here, we have the Seagrove Caves, and I'll go ahead and read the caves overview. The caves on the southwest side of the Stormwreck Isle are inhabited by an unusual colony of myconoids, fungus people who would normally live deep underground. Though they can't abide sunlight, these myconoids used to welcome visitors now and then. In particular, they traded with Turok from Dragon's Rest, giving him rare fungi that grow in their caves in exchange for food scraps and other waste from the cloister, which nourished the fungi in the caves. Recently, though, the myconoids have rejected Turok's visits and placed a monstrous guardian at the entrance of their caves that keeps all visitors away. The reason for this sudden shift in the myconoids' behavior is that a blight has spread across the caves and is poisoning the myconoids, twisting their gardens and even laying low their leader, Sinessa. The source of this blight is the tomb of the red dragon Saruth deep beneath the island. Noxious fumes from the dragon's tomb normally filter up through the rock and vent to the surface through a cavern at the back of Seagrove Caves that the myconoids avoid. But the vent has become blocked, and fumes have spilled into the myconoids' caves. Besides this insidious poison, visitors to Seagrove Caves must face one additional threat: the sturges that nest in the caves. These blood-sucking monsters aren't much of a threat individually and don't bother the bloodless myconoids, but they can be deadly in large numbers. Okay, we have some information that describes the interior of the caves and two of the entry points that the characters can approach from, either by sea in a small ship or a small boat that they have tied up at the docks, or from above if they explore the island and enter it that way. Now, we have some information as well about interacting with the myconoids, although they do communicate telepathically. Here we have the second map in the booklet, the third map in the booklet on page 18, which is the Seagrove Caves, which is divided into 6 different areas: B1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Cave number 6 is where the noxious gases are affecting the whole rest of the colony. So the entrance tunnel is B1. We have the fungus farm, the larder, the circle chamber, Sinessa's sanctum, and the crystal cave. I'll read a little bit of information about this because you should know that as the characters move through this different cave, the first thing they're going to run into is the Guardian, which is a spore servant octopus that hangs out near B1 and kind of prevents people from approaching. As you saw in the cover art there, it's enough to definitely deal with a boat of adventurers. That's something that is the first threat. And then they're going to move in through the caves and eventually interact with a couple of myconoids, but they're going to eventually reach the crystal cave where 2 fume drakes have taken up residence. Now, I'm going to read some information. I'm going to go ahead and read the descriptive text here. The air in this cave is choked with thick smoke that assaults your nostrils with the pungent odor of brimstone. Strange, flickering orange light illuminates the smoke. This area is free of fungal growth. Instead, crystals grow from the rock. To your right, a large cluster of purple crystals juts from the stone. On the far wall, a glowing orange crystal wedged into a fissure in the cave wall seems to be the source of the light. Streaks of soot trace a path along the cave walls between the purple crystal and the fissure. This is where 2 fume drakes have taken up residence in the gases that have risen up. Now, fume drakes aren't exactly dragons. They do resemble dragons, but they're made up entirely of fumes, noxious gases, and you have the fire crystal here as well. Now, the fire crystal can be destroyed and thus releases the gases, because the fire crystal is what's blocking the gases from escaping, and they're filling up the tunnel. And you can see here that purple blotch, or those purple blotches on the myconoids, that is what is the sickness. That's the physical manifestation of the sickness, the plague that is affecting them. Now, once they have destroyed that crystal and vented the cave, Sinessa, their leader, the myconoids leader, does recover and rewards them if they're still around by the time she makes that recovery in about a day or two. One suggestion I would have, once the players have destroyed this crystal and let in all the natural light from the cave entrance above that leads up to the surface, is playing into that horror-esque aspect where a creature drops from the crystal and the characters only see a glance of it before the light kind of blinds them momentarily, and then before they look down, the creature is gone, and now they can hear it rustling around before it suddenly launches itself from a dark corner, and attacks them. Okay, once the characters end this chapter and destroy the crystal, as I said, Sinessa does recover, and the myconoids are grateful. They will gain a level if they didn't already do so from the Compass Rose, and they're not level 2 already. They will become level 2 if they were at the Compass Rose at the shipwreck. They'll now become level 3. And here we are at chapter 3, the Cursed Shipwreck. Now, at this point, we're about halfway through the adventure booklet, but as I mentioned before, the players can either go to the Cursed Shipwreck or the Seagrove Caves in either order. Now, once they've done either one, they're going to gain a level, and after completing both of them, they should be level 3. Here we have the shipwreck overview. Ever since the violent death of a gold dragon on the rocky shoal of the north side of Stormwreck Isle, the bone-strewn rocks have been the site of many shipwrecks throughout the centuries. One such shipwreck left a lasting mark on the island. About 40 years ago, a ship named Compass Rose, carrying passengers bound for the cloister, wrecked on the shoal, killing all aboard. To the horror of the cloister's residents, those who drowned found their way ashore as shambling zombies. Since the loss of that ship, each new shipwreck has brought a fresh wave of zombie sailors to the island's shore. Fortunately, shipwrecks are rare, or they were until recently. Not long ago, a harpy settled into the wreck of the Compass Rose. With its magically entrancing voice, the harpy has been luring ships to crash in the shoal and feasting on the unlucky sailors. The sailors who escape the harpy's talons end up as zombies, menacing the people of Dragon's Rest. So the harpy isn't really the biggest threat here. Actually, the biggest threat besides the harpy is a magical amulet that has been imbued by a curse that has been brought forth by long dead sailors' desperate prayers to a demon lord. And that's actually what's causing the zombies to keep coming up. It says here, most of the zombies who were aboard the ship when it wrecked are long gone, but some zombies have been trapped in the wreck for years. Now, on page 23, that goes on to describe the shipwreck features and information about running this chapter. Waves lap against a derelict ship lodged against a ridge of rocks and enormous dragon bones. A faint odor of rot wafts on the sea air, along with the sound of screeching seagulls and the roar of the surf. A tangled mess of tattered sails and rigging hangs off the starboard side of the main deck, offering one possible way to climb aboard. At the stern, you can make out a gaping hole in the hull beneath the waterline. So the players can kind of climb up over, or they can get down from the water point and approach that way. Here we have the shipwreck locations that correspond to the map. We have the main deck, the forecastle, the quarterdeck, the captain's quarters, the galley, the crew quarters, the mess hall, and the lower deck and the hold. So the biggest threat here we have, here we have on page 25 the map of the Compass Rose, or at least the wreck of the Compass Rose. You can see that it is partially sunken, although part of it is still above the water line. This hole in the hull is where the player can approach from, or they can climb aboard, from the rigging that has fallen over here. Now we have some information about the captain's chest, and that is actually where the players are going to find this talisman that keeps causing the zombies to pop up again and again and again. And along with the amulet or the token is a letter or a journal, I should say, that has been wrapped up and covered in wax and has been saved from the water damage because it is below the water line here. So I'll go ahead and I'll read what is in the entry, the last entry of this book that we've come to find out is the captain's journal. Our journey is ended. I fear my own is to continue in the most horrible way imaginable. Compass Rose wrecked on a shoal south of Neverwinter. Many sailors perished in the initial impact, and Aletha was gravely injured. As I tended her wounds, she clutched her talisman and breathed soft prayers. I asked her what the talisman signified. She told me love. Her husband waits for her at Dragon's Rest, having pledged his service to the dragon there. The talisman is made from locks of their hair, woven together as a promise to be reunited no matter what fate might befall them. It might have been a beautiful story had it not been for Aletha's gruesome end and the words of prayer I heard as she breathed her last. For she was begging Orcus, the prince of Undeath, to reunite her with her husband. I held her hands as the breath left her, and I felt a horrible chill pass through her. Next, I knew she was sinking her teeth into my neck. At the same moment, I heard moans begin to rise from the dead sailors all around us. What curse has she brought on us all? Already I feel a creeping chill overtaking my body. I am securing her talisman with this book in my chest, in the hope that someone who comes after us may end this nightmare by bringing Aletha's talisman to her husband. So it describes what the talisman is made of. It's made up of long locks of hair that have been woven together, some blonde, some black. And that talisman was imbued with a curse from Orcus that keeps regenerating zombies along with the original zombies that keep coming from new shipwrecks, which keep happening because a harpy has taken up residence in the shipwreck, has found it to be a wonderful location to feast upon sailors or feast upon flesh as she lures sailors to their death. Now, it says that you can give the option for 2 harpies in this point in the book. If the characters are second level, you're just going to up the ante with a second harpy. The harpy is a pretty curious creature for 2 or 3 players who are going to try to fight her. She does have a couple of attacks that give her advantage. She's got her talon, she's got a club, and she can fly. So the characters are going to have to be smart about how they take her on. But it does have some options here. Again, not everything has to be about combat in D&D. Just like with that option of the zombies earlier, the characters can avoid this encounter altogether by either talking to the harpy, or if there are 2 harpies, trying to get the harpies to bicker amongst themselves. Because although the harpies don't want the humans here or don't want the adventurers here, they also don't trust each other. And so you can kind of play into that. But once we've defeated the harpies and we're either second or third level, we still have to deal with some of the remaining zombies on the island and the zombies that are going to keep recurring in those shipwrecks. But the harpies are gone, so the shipwrecks are going to be happening less often, but there's still those zombies that are around the island. So you have some information here in the ending of this chapter about how you can kind of grant some peace to the zombies, or break the curse, as it were, which is either to take the talisman to Renara, where she tells the characters about the husband who has passed years ago, but where his grave is located. The characters can take the talisman there. They can destroy the talisman on the ship, or in some other fashion. But if they do something with the talisman that you find satisfactory, the curse is broken, and you have some kind of descriptive text that describes the effects of that make it obvious the curse has been broken if the players are paying attention. All right, and here we have the culmination of the adventure in Chapter 4 at the Clifftop Observatory, where the players are going to face their greatest threat yet, Sparkrender, the Blue Wormling. This chapter, let's go ahead and check out the overview. During its heyday, the Clifftop Observatory was a marvel of magical innovation. Adorned with gorgeous stained glass windows and marble spires, the observatory's towers stood high above the churning sea on separate islets, linked by shimmering bridges of magical energy. But the observatory was wrecked when Renara battled her blue dragon rival centuries ago, and now it lies in ruin, a crumbled memory overtaken by nature. In recent months, the observatory ruins have become the home of an arrogant blue dragon wormling called Sparkrender, a descendant of Renara's ancient rival. Like his ancestor, Sparkrender seeks to claim the destructive magic that lingers at the site. Like Renara, Sparkrender has recruited kobolds to join his cause. About 5 days ago, before the characters arrived on the island, a bronze dragon wormling named Adrian left the safety of Dragon's Rest and Renara's tutelage and came to the ancient observatory. The two wormlings met and immediately clashed. Sparkrender attempted to turn the bronze wormling against Renara, but Adrian's hatred of chromatic dragons was stronger than his disagreement with Renara. Ultimately, Sparkrender overpowered Adrian and imprisoned him in the observatory ruins. Sparkrender believes Adrian is the key to unlocking the observatory's magic and claiming his ancestors' power. With the bronze wormling imprisoned, Sparkrender began planning a ritual that will awaken the spirits of the island's dead dragons and bind them to his will, at the cost of Adrian's life. Whoo, man. So here we have a little bit of the artwork. This is some of the ruins in the background here of the observatory. We have the wormling Sparkrender, and some of the adventurers here. Okay, so we have information about the observatory features as well as running this chapter. They can approach by land or by water, just like we did at the sea caves. Now, the characters will not be able to get to this point until they have spoken to Renara after completing the Sea Grove Caves and the Compass Rose shipwreck, and potentially have dealt with the zombies as well. So we also have information about Sparkrender's kobold allies. Okay, now we have on page 30 the Clifftop Observatory map. Now, D1 is the area that the players will approach from by land, and you can see these dotted lines represent the bridges, the magical bridges that no longer are functioning, but they can become active through use of the Moonstone Key. So we have the different areas described here. First is the Overlook. A broken and overgrown path winds to the edge of the cliff. The overlook is marked by two marble statues veined with gold, each carved in the shape of a dragon with its mouth open in a silent roar. We also have the Rotunda ruins, where some winged kobolds are located, as well as a golden sculpture with some dragon effigies. There's also the bridge anchors. And then we have the kobold camp, where there are some more kobolds located in D3. We have D4, the isolated study. D5, the observatory tower. And finally, we have D6, the secret library. So looking at the map here, this is the center of the observatory here. This golden statue described is actually kind of like a planetarium. It says here, the sculpture in the center of the rotunda is an astronomical model used for research in centuries past. So it kind of has the planet of the Forgotten Realms, which is Toril, and its moon, Saloon, as well as the sun and several other planets, and some comets that seem to be on an eccentric course. Now, the dragon effigies are also important as well, because each of the effigies corresponds to one of the 5 dragons that you see listed here. This is going to be important because these effigies play a part in Sparkrender's plans, and they're going to come up later on. So when the characters enter the Rotunda, they're going to face off against some kobolds that are fighting some sturges. Again, sturges on their own, 1 or 2 are not a major threat, but in a swarm, they definitely can overwhelm characters. And 2 winged kobolds are no match for 8 sturges. But 6 of them turn on the characters when they first enter the observatory, and the characters have the option to either help the kobolds, fight the sturges, whatever they want to do in this point. And we have the kobold camp, where the characters can successfully intimidate some other kobolds to kind of give up some information. And then we have the isolated study and some information about a scholar's journal. Now, this scholar's journal is trapped but the characters can overcome that trap. If they try to open the journal without overcoming this trap, then they are going to take some poison damage. But there are ways to overcome it, and it has a little bit of information about the comets that are going to be flying over that are part of Sparkrender's ritual. And there's treasure that can be had kind of in different places in this adventure as well. Now we have the observatory tower, and this is actually where Sparkrender is located, because their first sighting of Sparkrender happens before we even get into the observatory. And I'll go ahead and I'll read that information here in Approaching by Water. As you round the southeastern tip of the island, you can see the crumbling ruins atop basalt columns just off the main island body. If you pull the boat ashore on the island, it would be an easy walk up to the top of the cliffs, though there is no obvious bridge from the cliffs to the ruins. Alternatively, you could tie the boat up at the bottom of the columns and try to climb directly up to the ruins. As you consider these options, you hear a screeching roar and notice a winged, glittering blue shape swooping through the air ahead of you. The figure comes to rest atop the column farthest from Stormwreck Isle and vanishes from sight. And so where Sparkrender vanishes to is into the observatory tower. Now, Sparkrender is actually sleeping in a corner of the tower, and the characters have two options here. They can either sneak around him with a successful dexterity check, or they can wake him up and do battle with the dragon. Now, as with other points in the adventure, the characters have choices here because not everything in D&D is about combat. And that's what I like about this adventure so far, is that it really isn't focused on just the combat. There's a lot of options for the characters to use their dialogue, their wits, their role play to overcome challenges instead of just magic and swords. So when the dragon awakens, they are going to do battle with the dragon because he's trying to drive them out. Okay, but they can also drive the dragon away either through defeating him outright, dropping him by enough hit points, or some other way of disrupting his plans. Now that doesn't mean he's going to be gone forever. If they drive Sparkrender away, there is the possibility he could return. Now, after we have either snuck around or dealt with the dragon or the wormling, we're going to find the hidden entrance where Adrian is being held captive by Sparkrender. We're also going to find some treasure here with the whole horde of Sparkrender being available now that he has been driven off or defeated. We also have some information about the secret library, and that is where, so the entrance leads to the secret library, and that is where Adrian is being held captive. Now, if this character sneak around Sparkrender before battling with him and find the hidden entrance down to the secret library and free Adrian, Adrian will offer assistance in the battle against Sparkrender. Okay, so we have dealt with Sparkrender. The character should be level 3 before they get to this point. Now we've dealt with Sparkrender, but there is still the potential for him to return if the characters didn't defeat him outright. Okay, and so if he is just driven off and the characters leave this observatory, there's that possibility that he could return. Alternatively, if the characters defeat him but don't rescue Adrian, and and Sparkrender is not dead, he can try to come back and complete that ritual as well. So here we have the information about Sparkrender's ritual. If the characters take too long, if they fight him and then they have to leave because he's a little too strong, and then they come back, if there's been a sufficient amount of time, then Sparkrender has already begun carrying out his plans to sacrifice Adrian during this ritual. Okay, and so here's information about that ritual. Streams of colored light swirl through the air around the golden statue in the ruined rotunda. Each shimmering display seems to originate from one of the 5 dragon effigies you saw before, and the light's colors match the colors of the effigies: red, gold, brass, blue, and bronze. A blue dragon is perched atop the sculpture, throwing its head back in pain or ecstasy as the lights surround him, and he unleashes a bolt of lightning up toward the sky. At the base of the statue, a bronze dragon is bound to the ground by 3 heavy chains. He looks like he's in agony. Okay, so we find ourselves in the middle of Sparkrender's ritual. Now, the lights that are swirling around actually have different effects. And so when we enter into combat because there are several kobolds going to be present around. But once we enter into combat, these lights are going to have different manifestations that correspond to the different dragons, or the different lights. Some of them will affect the players, some of them will affect spark render. And you have the table here as well. So you're going to roll a d10 on after the end of each round to see what happens. Then you have information about freeing Adrian, disrupting the ritual, manipulating the effigies to affect the different lights, or destroying the effigies outright to affect different lights, or destroying the effigies outright, and information about manipulating the sculpture, which is that golden astronomical thing. It doesn't really have an effect. It's so big and sturdy, it's hard to move the thing in one turn, but trying to move it and messing with it at all does distract Spark Render enough that gives him disadvantage. Once we have defeated Spark Render, either before or after he's begun conducting his ritual, we now find ourselves at the end of the adventure. With Adrian in tow, the characters can return victorious to Dragon's Rest. Renara is pleased by the Brawn Wormling's safe return. As a reward, she gives the characters each a potion of healing and an exquisite pearl worth 100 gold pieces. She welcomes them to stay at Dragon's Rest as long as they wish, and furnishes them with whatever supplies they need for their travels when they're ready to leave the island. If Spark Render is dead, she grieves the death of yet another dragon on Stormwreck Isle, but she doesn't condemn the players for killing him. If your players wish to continue playing their characters, you can use the contents of this set to create your own adventure, or you can continue exploring the island as described in Chapter 1. It also goes on to say perhaps Spark Render or a relative of his pursues the characters in search of vengeance. And if you want to continue the adventure past level 3, you got to get the expanded rule books. That's the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. All right, guys, that is the adventure for Dragons of Stormwreck Isle, levels 1 to 3, chapters 1 through 4. I hope you guys liked it. I think it's a great adventure. I mean, you get a lot here in just a couple of levels. You have a lot of options for combat, a lot of options for ingenuity, and you get this whole island to explore with zombies, owl bears, and a whole bunch of other different creatures. And then it culminates in a battle against a dragon, which not many level 3 characters are going to fight. Okay, so we're going to wrap this up with a quick look at the appendices. The first one here is our magic item appendices, and it gives a few descriptions of some of the magic items that are available in this adventure, as well as a hint, as it says, at some of the magic items in the greater D&D adventures, or in the worlds of D&D. So here we have the Boots of Elvenkind, an Elixir of Health, Potion of Healing, Potion of Resistance, a Spell Scroll, and a Weapon of +1 stats. And then we have the creature appendices, where it's going to give you information about how to interpret the stat blocks from size to type to saving throws and skills, what different senses or languages, and some of the limited uses for their special abilities. Ooh, and there we have Spark Render, well, a description of a blue dragon, I should say, blue dragon wormling, and this is going to be the stat block for Spark Render. Some great artwork there. We're going to have a stat block for an adult and wormling bronze dragon. We have some stat blocks for the kobold tinkerers, the myconoids, the owlbear, and their spore servant, as well as some of the sturges and Turok and Varnoth. Oh, and we can't forget about those fungus and zombies we're going to face there as well. Okay, 48 pages in this booklet, and I think that's more than enough for a level 1 through 3 adventure, especially considering that you have everything that you need in the box to play this right out of the get. Okay, now we're going to take a quick look at the character sheets that are included in this adventure. Here we have the cleric with the stat block and everything already filled out. We have their proficiencies and attacks, and some information about the cleric's spells. On the back here, we have some of the background about the cleric, as well as some of the racial information and some of the things that tie into those quest points for the adventure that we saw earlier. Here we have the fighter, who is a wood elf, and the folk hero background. Then we have the paladin, who is a human. We have a Lightfoot halfling rogue. And finally, a high elf wizard. All right, everybody, that's it for the adventure of Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. I really appreciate you checking this out with me. I hope you enjoyed the quick read through, and I hope you found the adventure as entertaining as I did. If you'd like to share your own experiences with this campaign, please do so in the comments below or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button and make sure you subscribe so you never miss out on any of the awesome content coming your way from your favorite dungeon master. And if you aren't already doing so, please check me out on Instagram and TikTok, where you can find even more awesome content. Hey, it's me, post-production DM JANGY. So that video ended a little abruptly, and I wanted to make sure I did a proper wrap-up. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy playing the adventure of Dragons of Stormwreck Isle. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.